Hey y'all, hope that your weekend is going well. I wanted to make a relatively short video today covering the absolute basics of ggplot at least, so that when we come in to drill this coming week and as well as on the homework this coming week, we'll be able to start making some basic at least scatter plots and histograms. So if you want to follow along today and work through these same graphs that I'll be making, you'll need to install this library called car, which is where I'm getting the data that I'm going to be using today. This data is just a data set consisting of 397 professors, and there's from two different disciplines, A and B, and it also has how many years since they earned their PhD, how many years they've been in service, whether they were male or female, and what their salary is. So we're going to be graphing out some of this data, although I would also suggest to open up the MT cars data set or the diamonds or any of the other data sets and try to make some different graphs on your own, because as Patrick has alluded to before, sometimes struggling through things a little bit is really the best way to figure it out and have it really set in for you so in a way that you can remember. So I definitely suggest not just watching this video, but also working through some graphs and trying to make some graphs on your own. Certainly if you do, whether you're working with this or trying to make your own graphs, if you're having problems with it and want some help with it, just shoot me an email and let me know. Data visualization is without a doubt my absolute favorite part of data analysis. I'm a firm believer in good visualizations are able to give you a better understanding of your data. You're able to get a more nuanced understanding of your data and really see what's going on rather than simply looking at some numbers on an output to say what's going on. So there's a few basic concepts today, three concepts really that we'll be hitting on, that this will all make sense as we explain through some of these things, but I'll just kind of tell you in brief up on the front end that ggplot is a method. Ggplot means the grammar of graphics, and basically it's a way of layering information. So you give ggplot a piece of information at a time, and then just continuously add new things on top of that, and then another layer on top of that, and another layer on top of that. And again, just bear with me and all this will make sense here shortly. AES is a function that you'll see in these ggplot commands, and that's the aesthetics. And what aesthetics mean is you telling ggplot that something that you're going to be doing in your graph is based on the information in the data frame. So in other words, if you want your dots to be blue, you can just tell ggplot, make my dots blue, and it will make your dots blue. If instead you want your plots to be colored differently depending on whether it's male or female, and you want blue for female and red for male, then that would be an aesthetic, because you're now telling ggplot the color is based on some information in this data frame. Again, this will make sense here very shortly. And then geoms is shorthand for like a geometric object of some sort. So that's the different types of things that you can put on these graphs. So whether they're points, dots for making a scatter plot, or if they're bars if you're making a bar chart or a histogram, or if it's a line if you're making a line graph, all those are geoms. That's telling ggplot what type of visualization are you wanting to put on this graph. So we'll start by loading in this salaries data set. Again, this is in the car package, so if you install and load car, you can type the same command and you'll get salaries. I'm storing it as a data frame called money. Again, we have 397 observations of these 6 variables. So let's start by running a basic histogram. So the command will be ggplot, and you have to tell it what data you're wanting to use. So I tell it the data equals money. because that's the name of my data frame down here. And now I need to put in aesthetics up here in this line because I have to tell ggplot what I want my axes to be. In this case, since I'm doing a histogram, there's only one variable that's on an axis, which is my salary. So I'll tell it my x-axis equals salary. Now, if I run this line, you'll notice that ggplot will give me, sorry, it would help if I put in my aesthetics. Now if I run this plot, ggplot will give me a plot where it put my salary on the x-axis down here because I told it. For the x-axis in this plot, use the salary variable. That's the aesthetic. Use the salary variable to make the x-axis from the money data frame. But notice how it's blank up here, and that's because I haven't told ggplot anything else to do to put on this graph. So now out here next to this, I'll add a plus to tell it, hey, I'm going to add another layer on top of this blank graph where salary is on the x-axis. And in this case, I want to do a histogram, so I will tell it that I want a geom histogram. And now when I run this, it will run both of these lines together, both of these layers, it will run it together. And now it will put this histogram on top of my otherwise blank graph up here. So again, like this right here is the absolute basic minimum bare bones histogram that you can make. You just tell it what my data is, money, what my aesthetics are, in this case my x-axis, I want it to be from the salary variable, and then I tell it I want geom histogram to make it into a histogram. But let's say, for instance, instead of a histogram, I want to make a scatter plot. And let's say that we want to make a scatter plot that it seems pretty intuitive to think that the longer somebody has been in service, the more they get paid. So let's make a histogram where we're going to put years of service down here on the x-axis and salary up here on the y-axis. So we're going to tell ggplot that our data is money, and this time again our x-axis we want years in service, YRS service, and our y-axis we want to be salary. Now again, if we just run this line, ggplot will give us our plot, and just like we asked, it put years of service on the x-axis and it put salary on the y-axis, but it's not showing any dots or anything because we haven't told it to. So we're going to add another layer by adding the plus here, and then we come down below and we're going to tell it that we want to add points. So geom points, and now when we run that line, we see that we have our basic scatter plot here. Now, as far as that's really as far as you really need to go. So as far as I'm concerned, what you need to retain and remember is just what I've talked to up to this point. I would, however, like to at least expose you to and introduce you to a few next step kind of things as far as being able to customize these graphs and really get more information out of it. And as time goes on, in the drills and in the homeworks, I'll walk you through some of these steps because there really is more than any one person can retain as far as just how much you can customize these and all the different options that you have. But let's take this particular plot and play with this and see how we can get more information out of this. So again, as far as I'm concerned, you only need to know what's above here. So down here, I'm just going to copy and paste this exact same thing. But I want to add some more stuff to this. So let's say that we want to add a line of best fit to this. Just like if you're doing a scatter plot and you want that correlation line of best fit. So there's another geom called Geom Smooth, which helps visually give you a better sense of the data. And there's different ways of doing the Geom Smooth. So all you really need to know is that the line of best fit, you'll type in Geom Smooth and you'll tell it that method equals LM in quotation marks, and that's from a linear model. So basically this gives a regression line of all of this data based on what you've put in. So if we run that, now it adds in this line of best fit. As a side note, one thing that I always do, there's different themes that are, a few different themes by default that are built in as far as making these look nice. So if you add another layer and you look at theme, there's this black and white and classic, dark gray, light, etc. If we just look at these, if I change this to theme black and white and now run the command, you can see it's no longer that gray background. Now we have kind of this white background, but we do have some major and minor lines in there. If we change that to theme classic, now when we run it, it's just a solid white background. We don't have any lines. If we change that to theme dark, so you can play with all these different themes and see what you like. But I typically stick with either theme classic or theme black and white for like a starting point, just in terms of making meaningful graphs. And this, of course, can all be completely customized, but that's another day. So we have this basic graph. Well, let's say that we want to change the color of the dots. You could tell it in here that your color equals blue, and it will now give you blue dots, or that the color equals red, and it will now give you red dots. But again, like, I want to color it based on their rank. I want to see the difference of associate professors versus assistant professors versus full professors. So again, because now I'm telling it I want you to color it depending on information that's in the data, I want to use a color aesthetic. So I'll tell it AES for aesthetic, color equals rank, because rank is this factor down here that I'm interested in. So now when I run this plot, you can see that now here are my associate professors, or my assistant professors. Here are mostly my associate professors, and then the full professors are up here in blue. So again, all you have to do is tell it that the aesthetic is to color it based on rank down here, and it'll make this nice pretty graph for you. And let's say going one step further, if you really wanted to, let's make those a little bit bigger too. So if I want to change my size of my geom points, let's change that size to 3, and kind of clogs it all up and brings it together. But when you zoom it in, maybe we can still get some useful information. So perhaps I want to change the shape of my dots depending on whether it's discipline A or discipline B. Then here in my points, in my aesthetics, I'll also tell it shape equals discipline. And now when I run that graph, you can see that it's changed it to where all my discipline A's are here in circles and my discipline B's are in triangles. So you can see how, like, each step of this process, you can very quickly start to add more and tweak and piece things together. But I don't really like that. That's not particularly helpful because it's still kind of cluttered. So instead of making those as a shape, let's say that I want to just break that down into two separate panels and have like all my A's on one graph and all my B's on another graph, then I can use what's called facet grid, and I'll break it down by discipline. And so now you can see here's all my A's and here's all of my B's. So whatever this B field is, it seems that their pay increases more as they've been in longer than this field over here, who has kind of this less steep slope of the line of best fit, whereas these guys over here go up a lot faster. Now, as far as what this little period and tilde here is, that's just telling facet grid that there's only one thing I want to facet by. And so here, because I put this period before it, that's going to break it and put them side by side. If instead I come in here and I say discipline tilde period and run the line, now it's going to put A on top of B. If instead I say I also want to break it down and have this be a 2x2 panel broken down by discipline and sex, I can do that, where now it has females over here, males over here, A up here, B down here. Or if I want to switch that around and do it the other way, I can do that just by switching that around. Now females are on top, males are on bottom, A's over here, B's over here. But all of that is definitely getting into more than what we need right now. Again, the main thing that I'm really wanting to get across to you today is the basics of what an aesthetic means, which is you're pulling information and you're changing part of your graph based on the data that's available instead of giving it an explicit thing. And then that these various geomes, but again, right now, geome point and geome histogram are really the only main ones that we're going to use, as well as this geome smooth method equals LM, which is how you're going to get your line of best fit on here. Just as an example of when you might use a size aesthetic, you might want to size things based on how long it's been since they've had their PhD. And now when you run that, you can see that you know, the smaller the dot, the more recently that they got their PhD. So again, this is a pretty ugly graph right here. I'm just trying to make a point that this is what your aesthetics mean, that these are what your geomes mean, and what the idea of layered graphics. So this graph right here has you know, one layer here that if you just run this, you get just a blank graph. If you run these first two lines with two layers, this is what this graph looks like. When you add this third layer, this is what the graph looks like. When you add this next layer, this is what the graph looks like. And when you run all 5 layers, then now we have this nice cleaned up theme. We have it faceted by discipline. We have our line of best fit for each group, and we have it colored based on what their rank was. Our x-axis is based on years of service. Our y-axis is salary. Our data is money. So whenever we say like we need a histogram, just remember you just have to tell it what your x-axis is as an aesthetic and tell it geome histogram. And the most basic scatter plot, all you have to do is tell it where your data is, tell it that your aesthetics, tell it what your x and y axes are, and tell it geome point. And as long as you can do that, you can do a basic scatter plot. Now there is a ggplot cheat sheet. But I want to give you a warning before I pull this up, just to let you know that there's a lot of information on here that you don't need, but it might be good to go ahead and look it up. So when you're looking at this, this shows you what all the different geomes are. So if you're wanting a density plot or a dot plot, like all of these are your one variable plots where all you're doing is you're telling it what x equals. If you have two variables. You have these other things that you can do, box plots or violin plots and line plots. Don't really need to worry about all that too much. Down here, depending on whether things are discrete or continuous for your coloring, that like if it's continuous, it will fade from one color to another as things increase or decrease. If it's discrete, that just means it's categorical. So you'll have, you know, red, yellow, green, blue instead of dark blue to light blue kind of thing. All the different shapes, there are ways to specify and manually do it. So down here where I run this graph, and here by default it gives me this red, green, and blue. Perhaps I want that to be purple, orange, and yellow. You know, there are ways to customize and specify all these different things, and we don't need to worry about any of that right now. The main thing, again, I just want to really hammer in, the main thing that you need to know is this right here. As long as you can do this right here, then you can do the basic graphs that we will be needing moving forward as the class. I would definitely be more than happy to sit down and get into the weeds of just how customizable all these things are. I don't think we need to just yet. I think that as we go on throughout the year, we will introduce you to more and more things in terms of getting meaningful information out of these data visualizations. And I'm hoping that by the end of this year, everyone will be, you know, fluent in ggplot and be able to make these really nice, meaningful plots. So that's all that I have for you today. I hope that this cleared it up. If not, just shoot me an email and let me know, and I would be more than happy to discuss it with you. But until next time, have a good one.